Listen closely, because this is not a tale you were ever meant to hear. In 1849, three sisters were swallowed whole by the Mississippi River. Their neighbors wept, the priest prayed, and the town buried their small coffins in damp earth. That should have been the end, but it was only the beginning, because 3 nights after their burial, the ground betrayed its silence. The living saw footprints, wet, bare, and child-sized, pressed into the soil, not toward the church, but back toward the river, and no storm could wash them away. Understand what that means. This was no ordinary haunting, no passing legend for children to whisper under quilts. This was an intrusion. The dead were not staying dead, and the priests, with their Latin rites and holy water, were powerless. Every morning the marks gleamed fresh, as if pressed in the night by bodies that should have been rotting beneath the earth. The parish tried to deny it. Denial is the first weapon of frightened men. They said children had played tricks, barefoot in the mud. They said shadows tricked the eyes. But tell me, what child dares to walk barefoot among graves at midnight? What shadow leaves wet earth glistening before dawn? No, these were not games. They were reminders, signs that what the river takes, it does not always keep. And it was not just footprints. Some claimed to hear voices in the mist, faint laughter carried on the current. A fisherman swore he saw 3 shapes standing hand in hand in the reeds, only for them to dissolve like fog when he shouted. And others, hardened dockworkers, men unshaken by storms or drownings, refused to walk past the churchyard after dusk. They would rather take the long way, deeper into the swamp, than risk catching sight of those small, wet tracks pacing the graves. But here's the truth. The peace no priest dared speak. The curse did not begin with the drowning, and that river had been fed long before, and the Marigny family, they had ties not written in church record. You see, Louisiana in those years was more than cotton and trade. It was a place where French blood, African rights, and the old whispers of the swamps braided together into something neither the church nor the state could fully strangle. Genevieve Marigny, the girl's mother, was not a stranger to those whispers. She was a midwife, the kind who carried not only herbs in her satchel, but charms bound in red thread, muttered prayers older than Rome. And men feared her, not because of what she did, but because of what she refused to do. She never baptized her daughters. Not once did those 3 girls touch the font of the parish church. Think about that. In a time when infant mortality shadowed every family, when parents begged priests to seal their children's souls, Genevieve said no. She trusted another protection, a covenant that no priest could break. And when the river claimed them, that covenant came due. You will feel tempted, even now, to dismiss this as folklore, but you should know. Folklore is where the forbidden truth hides in plain sight. These stories survive not because they entertain, but because they warn. The Marigny curse was no mere superstition. It was a crack in the mask of religion, of society, of control, revealing that there are forces older than Scripture and hungrier than the men who call themselves shepherds. And the hunger of that river was not sated by 3 small coffins. It demanded memory, it demanded fear, and most of all, it demanded silence. The parish learned that speaking of the sisters too loudly invited strange disturbances, doors left open, children waking soaked in river water, though they had not left their beds, rosaries snapping in the hands of praying mothers. The priests tried to bury not only the girls, but the story itself, and yet it lingers, here, now, with us. You are beginning to see it, aren't you? That familiar sensation creeping up your spine, the knowing that this is more than history. Because when you peer into this darkness, the darkness peers back, and this is only the first layer. What waits beneath is worse. Do you feel it yet? The unease in your chest, that sense that the river still flows beneath your feet even now? Good. Because to understand the curse of the Marigny sisters, you must peel back the false light of Christian history and see what the church worked tirelessly to bury. The Marigny name was not just another family on the banks of the Mississippi. Their blood carried both privilege and suspicion. French Creole lines stretching back to New Orleans aristocracy, and whispers of ties to women who practiced arts the priests labeled unclean. Genevieve herself was never caught, never tried, But you must understand this. In Louisiana, accusations of witchcraft were not trials in court, but trials in gossip, in cold shoulders, in midnight prayers muttered to keep your shadow off someone else's doorstep. She was tolerated because she delivered children safely into the world. But men watched her closely, and women crossed themselves when she passed. The three sisters were born into that tension, and neighbors swore strange things happened around them long before their drowning. Crops failing in one field while wildflowers bloomed wildly in theirs. A storm splitting a parish roof in two while the Marigny house stood untouched, its wood damp but never broken. Children falling ill, then recovering after Genevieve stood at their bedside, her daughters peering from behind her skirts, eyes too old for their age. These were not accidents, at least the people did not believe they were. But nothing stirred the air more than the fact that none of the sisters were baptized. You must imagine what that meant in 1849 Louisiana. In the minds of devout Catholics, that was not just neglect, it was defiance. To withhold the waters of the church was to hand the child's soul over to something else. And what is not claimed by Christ, they said, is claimed by the river, by the swamp, by the things that live between. So when the sisters drowned, people muttered it was no accident. Some swore they had seen the girls walking too close to the water, as if answering a call no one else could hear. Others claimed to see Genevieve kneeling on the banks at dawn, her voice low, her daughters clutching her hands as if in some silent ritual. And when the river took them, those whispers hardened into certainty. The Marigny pact had been broken, and now the dead walked because the priest's soil could not hold them. The priests tried. Do not think they did not. Father Charon, a man with hands trembling from both age and drink, was called again and again to bless the graves. Latin thundered into the mist. Holy water poured into the soil until it turned to mud. But every dawn the prince returned, wet, bare, small, as though mocking his prayers. Each failed attempt left the parish weaker, more desperate. The authority of the church cracked like rotten wood, and in that fracture the old beliefs returned. Women began to leave offerings at the edge of the cemetery, beads, bread, coins, scraps of cloth. They whispered not to the saints, but to the sisters themselves. Stay quiet, stay away. The priests warned against it, but the fear was stronger than obedience. And you must understand how dangerous that was. The moment faith shifts, control breaks. The church does not fear ghosts. The church fears memory. It fears the people remembering that there are older systems of power, older than Rome, older than Christ, older than any empire. Systems that do not bow, do not confess, and cannot be absolved. And the Marigny curse reminded the parish of exactly that. But the curse was not content with footprints. It grew bolder. One night, a boy tending his father's animals swore he heard laughter in the fog, 3 voices, young, sharp, playful. He froze, and through the mist he saw them, 3 figures standing hand in hand by the river. They looked whole, not corpses. Their dresses clung damp to their bodies, their hair slick against their faces, but their eyes shone as if alive. He ran, screaming, to his parents, but when they returned with lanterns, nothing remained but rippling water. Another man, a fisherman, said his net came up heavy one dawn, not with fish, but with 3 small handprints pressed into the rope. No one believed him, until he showed the marks still wet on his skin where he had touched them. And in the weeks after, children began to wake soaked in bed, though no water had spilled. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Men sharpened their knives, though none could say what use steel had against what haunted them. Do you see how the curse worked? It was not violence, it was presence, the constant reminder that what was taken had not gone. The sisters lingered, not as souls waiting for heaven, not as restless phantoms trapped in limbo, but as something else, something claimed, preserved, returned. And so the question arose, whispered first in taverns, then in homes, then finally in the church itself. Were the sisters truly drowned? Their bodies were recovered, yes, but they did not look like others pulled from the river. No bloating, no marks. Their hair neat, their skin untouched, as if the water had never harmed them. Some said they looked like they were only sleeping. Others claimed their lips held the faintest smile. Tell me, does that sound like drowning to you, or does it sound like the river had simply carried them somewhere else, before returning them to the earth, marked, altered, waiting? The priests buried them anyway, sealing the coffins, speaking the rites, shoveling the earth. But burial is only effective when the ground accepts it. And here, The ground refused. Wet prints rising again and again from the soil proved it. The church had no power, the people saw it, and fear began to shift into something darker. Resentment, suspicion. It turned toward Genevieve. Always Genevieve. They whispered that she had bargained with the river, that her daughters were not its victims but its offering, that the reason their bodies remained untouched was because they had been chosen, kept, claimed by something older than God. Men who once tipped their hats now spat at her feet. Women who once called her in childbirth now turned her away. And Etienne, her husband, drowned his shame in liquor, muttering to himself that the river had not finished yet. But Genevieve did not flinch. When she visited the graves, she did not tremble. Witnesses swore she knelt in silence, her lips moving slowly, shaping words that were not Latin, not prayer, but something else. Something that made the mist grow heavier. Something that made the priest watching from the chapel steps retreat inside. So now ask yourself, what kind of mother kneels at her children's graves and does not weep but whispers? What kind of bond lingers past death so strongly that even the ground cannot keep it buried? I tell you this because history has tried to erase it. The records mention only a drowning, a burial, silence, but the truth never dies so easily. The curse of the Marigny sisters was not simply a haunting, it was proof. Proof that the systems we are told to trust, the priests, the prayers, the polished words of authority, are powerless when faced with forces older, darker, and truer. And once you see that crack in their mask, you cannot unsee it. This is the descent, and it only goes deeper from here. The living feared the dead, yes, but soon they began to fear themselves. Because the curse of the Marigny sisters was never content with silence. It spread like water, seeping into cracks, filling lungs, touching minds, and the first signs were subtle. A farmer's wife rose one morning to find her child standing barefoot at the door, mud caked between his toes. He swore he had only been dreaming, but the prince led straight from his bed to the threshold and out into the mist. When they followed them, they found the trail vanished at the river's edge. The boy could not explain it. He only said he heard laughter and that the sisters wanted him to play. Another child woke drenched, not in sweat, but in water. Her sheets soaked, her hair slick against her scalp. Her mother wrung the linens out until they dripped onto the floorboards, and yet no bucket, no roof, no leak explained it. The priest said it was trickery of the devil, but the mother said she smelled the river on her daughter's skin. These were not isolated stories. They spread, whispered in the market, murmured in the taverns, each one layered on the next until the entire parish began to feel it, the sense that the sisters were not gone, that they were calling. The curse was not haunting others. It was infiltrating you. And here is where it grows darker still. The men of the parish, dock workers, fishermen, fathers, hardened by loss, began to confess something strange. At night, when they returned late from the river, they felt eyes on them. Small eyes, gentle eyes, not hostile, not frightening, something worse. The gaze of children. They heard giggling, fleeting and familiar. One man swore he heard the sound of 3 girls skipping behind him, though the path was empty. Another admitted he dreamed of drowning, but in the dream he did not resist. He let the water take him, because 3 pale hands were pulling him down, and he could not say no. Understand this. True curses do not roar. They whisper. They seduce. They do not terrify you into running. They soften you into staying. The Marigny sisters were not attacking the parish. They were inviting it to follow, and grief can be weaponized. The Marigny sisters were not just symbols of tragedy. They were symbols of revolt against a system that demanded silence. Their curse forced the people to confront what they had buried in themselves. Doubt, rebellion, desire for something older than the church, and that is why priests called it blasphemy. Not because of the footprints, not because of the laughter in the fog, but because people were listening, believing, shifting. So tell me now, do you believe the story ends here, that the curse remained only footprints and whispers? Or do you see, as I do, that once a people surrender their fear to something beyond the institution begins to die? The Marigny curse was not just about 3 drowned girls. It was about power, and power never drowns. It resurfaces, again and again. We have only begun to descend. Do you feel how deep the water is now? The first steps were footprints in the mud, whispers in the mist. But curses are not static. They grow, they hunger, they demand. And the river had only begun to feed. After the failed midnight mass, the parish was never the same. The church no longer spoke with authority. People still attended, yes. Fear makes men cling to habit. But when the priest raised the chalice, eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting damp, barefoot children to slip inside. His words rang hollow. The river had spoken louder, and the river began to take. Not only the sisters, others. A boy of 14 pulled under while bathing. His body surfaced days later, face pale, eyes closed, his hand curled as if grasping something unseen. A grown man, steady on the docks for years, suddenly slipped, shouting that someone had taken his ankle. When they dragged the water, they found no rope, no snag, nothing but the churn of silt. The pattern grew too sharp to ignore. It was not chance. It was not clumsiness. It was appetite. And in the taverns, when men whispered with their cups close to their lips, the question grew bold. Were the Marigny sisters calling them? You must imagine the terror of that thought, that 3 children, buried and blessed, could still draw breath from the living. And yet terror turned slowly to temptation, because some admitted, in broken whispers in midnight confession, that they had dreamed of the sisters, not as corpses, not as horrors, but as children alive again, smiling, laughing, holding out their hands. Dreams so vivid that men awoke with mud on their feet, women with damp hair clinging to their cheeks, dreams that felt less like dreams and more like invitations. The curse had shifted. It was no longer content to haunt. It was recruiting. This is the forbidden truth that institutions never admit. Fear is only one side of control. Desire is the other. And when fear and desire intermingle, men will surrender to forces they would once have fought. The sisters no longer terrified. They called. And Genevieve, always silent, always watchful, became the unspoken bridge. When another child drowned, the mothers of the parish did not go to Father Charon. They went to her. They begged for herbs, for charms, for whispered words, and she gave them. She tied strings around wrists, placed powders beneath pillows, muttered chants that tasted foreign on the ear. Some swore it worked, that their children slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Others claimed the river's pull only grew stronger, the laughter closer, the dreams more vivid. To join. And the parish, already broken by fear, began to fracture in two. Some clung harder to the church, filling pews, crossing themselves at every shadow, begging the priest to exorcise the graves. Others turned quietly toward Genevieve. They remembered her herbs, her whispers, her strange eyes that always seemed to know when a storm was coming, and they began to wonder if perhaps she had not cursed them at all, but protected them. This division was the true infection, because once a community doubts its shepherd, it begins to look for new masters, and power shifts, not through elections, not through armies, but through belief. Fear bends faith, and faith bends reality. The church grew desperate. Father Charon announced he would perform a midnight mass over the graves, sealing the ground once and for all. Lanterns were lit, bells tolled, and the people gathered in the damp mist. But do you know what happened? As he raised his voice in prayer, the mist grew thicker. The flame of every lantern sputtered, dimmed, then died. And in that suffocating darkness, the people heard it, bare feet splashing in mud, moving swiftly among them. Women screamed, men drew knives against nothing, and when the lanterns were relit, every grave in the yard bore new footprints, wet and glistening, not just the sisters' graves, every grave. That night broke the parish. The church had failed publicly, undeniably, and the people began to whisper openly. Perhaps the sisters were not damned. Perhaps they were chosen. Perhaps the river itself had kept them. You must see what this means. The curse was no longer only about 3 drowned girls. It became about control, about authority unraveling, about the people realizing that the priests, with all their rites and threats of hellfire, could not contain the power that moved just beneath their feet. And that realization is more dangerous than an "I ghost." Because when men believe the system cannot protect them, they look for another system. And Louisiana, with its tangled roots of Catholic ritual, African rhythms, and indigenous memory, had another system waiting in the shadows. One older, darker, freer. The whispers of voodoo, of river spirits, of bargains made not on knees before an altar, but standing barefooted in the mud, speaking to the water itself. And Genevieve, widow now in all but name, became the axis of those whispers. She never confessed. She never defended herself. She simply went on as before, silent, eyes sharp, carrying her herbs and charms. But the people began to watch her differently. Some spat in fear, others sought her in secret, leaving tokens on her porch, begging for protection. Her silence was her weapon. It allowed every imagination to feed upon itself, and imagination is more powerful than proof. The curse deepened. Nightly, the footprints multiplied, the children's dreams spread. Livestock were found drowned in shallow water, their mouths open as if gasping for something unseen. And the Mississippi itself, swollen, restless, began to claim more. A boat overturned. A man pulled under at the dock. Always the same story. The water churned, circled, then stilled. Always too fast, too sudden, always no body until days later. The parish began to say it plainly now. The river wanted more. The sisters had not been lost. They had been claimed, and the river was not finished. Listen to me carefully here. This is the heart of forbidden history. Institutions tell you that death is final, that burial is closure, that grief is a sealed wound. But curses like this expose the truth. Death can be porous. Burial can be denied. But the shift was irreversible. The parish no longer asked whether the curse was real. They asked instead, how do we survive it? And here is the darkest part. Some began to think survival required offering. They remembered how the Marigny sisters had been taken together hand in hand, and how the curse began only afterward. Was it not then the river's pact? Did the river demand its share each spring? One story, hushed and nearly lost, tells of a mother who, in her terror, placed a doll at the riverbank, its dress sewn from her child's clothes, its hair clipped from her daughter's head. She left it with bread and flowers. The next morning, the doll was gone. That year, her daughter lived untouched, while another child vanished beneath the current. Coincidence? Or selection? You decide. But offerings grew, not just dolls, not just flowers, coins placed in mud, chickens left bound and squawking until the river rose and carried them off. The riverbank became an altar, not a church's, but one older, darker, more honest. An altar of fear, an altar of bargain. And the priests raged. Yes, they warned of damnation, thundered against heathen practices. But what is damnation compared to the laughter of your child echoing from beneath the river at night? What is sin when the soil refuses to keep your dead? The priests spoke of heaven and hell, but the river offered something more immediate, more visceral, presence. The curse was not only on the Marigny family now, it had infected the parish, the land, the river itself. And once an entire community bends toward fear, the system that held it fractures. The church's sermons no longer bound behavior. The river did. Do you see what is happening? This is not just folklore. This is the anatomy of power. Authority does not die when it is disproven. It dies when something else proves stronger. In 1849, on the banks of Louisiana, the Mississippi proved stronger than Rome. The deaths continued. Sporadic, merciless, the priest could not stop them, the mother could not shield against them, and still every burial carried the same mark, footprints leading back to the water. It was as if the sisters had become envoys, collectors, handmaidens of a river god that no priest could name. And here is where the story coils tighter, because some began to envy it, to whisper in the secrecy of candlelight that perhaps the sisters had not been cursed, but freed, that they had transcended the fragility of flesh and joined the current, eternal, untouchable. What greater power than to never rot, never wither, never bow to the soil? Do you see it now? The curse was not punishment, it was revelation. The parish was not being tormented, it was being shown that death need not be final, that authority need not be trusted, that life could be bargained beyond the grave. The river did not curse them. It awakened them, and awakening is dangerous, because once men awaken to power beyond institutions, they do not return quietly. The Marigny sisters had become more powerful dead than alive. Their mother had become more powerful silent than speaking, and the parish had become more obedient to the river than to the church. This is the descent. This is the forbidden. And if you listen closely, even now you might hear it. The whisper of water against wood, the faint sound of wet feet on stone, the laughter of children calling you closer, because the river never finished, the river never sleeps, and the pact never ended. Do you see the shape of it now? A single drowning became a haunting became a hunger became an altar, and altars do not stay hidden. The Marigny curse did not remain confined to a single parish. Fear leaks, Whispers travel. Sailors spoke of it in taverns downriver. Priests carried warnings up to Baton Rouge, even to New Orleans. The story spread like mist itself, a churchyard that would not stay silent, children who still walked after death, a river that demanded. And when word reached the bishop's ear, action followed. He sent a delegation of priests, young, strong, with voices unshaken by drink. They carried relics, censers, blessed oils, the full weight of Rome behind them. They came not to comfort, but to correct, to restore order. But curses do not yield to titles. The priests ordered the cemetery sealed, no family allowed to visit, no flowers, no offerings. They ordered Genevieve taken from her home, questioned, pressed to confess. And though they threatened her with excommunication, with prison, with eternal damnation, she said nothing. Nothing. Not a single word. She looked each of them in the eye, and the silence was heavier than any curse. That night the priests held vigil over the graves. They sang psalms until their throats bled, fumigated the earth with incense so thick it choked the breath of those who watched from the gates. And yet when dawn broke, the prints were there, not 3 this time, but dozens, small, wet, winding between the priests' very feet, their shoes stained, their vestments marked. It was as if the sisters had danced among them while they prayed. The people saw. The authority of Rome crumbled on that soil, and though the priests cursed the ignorant, though they demanded obedience, the parishioners obeyed a deeper truth, that the river had won. But you must understand, when authority is defied, it does not fall, niche. It grows violent. Soon men from the state arrived, soldiers. They came not to bless but to silence. Their orders were simple: raze the cemetery, burn the church, scatter the bones, and break the altar of fear. To them, it was no different than stamping out a riot. Power does not fear ghosts. Power fears what ghosts awaken in men. So torches were raised, stones were torn down, bones dug from graves were cast into sacks, carted toward the river's edge. The soldiers worked with iron, with fire, with curses shouted at the people who wailed and begged for mercy. And then, silence. As the first sack of bones touched the current, the river surged. Not a wave, not a splash. A swell, as if something vast turned beneath. The cart toppled, the men shouted, and the water claimed them, whole. Pulled in with a force no hand could resist, the sacks vanished. The cart vanished. 2 men vanished. The river closed, flat and silent. The soldiers retreated, pale, shaking. The state withdrew its hand. And the cemetery remained, broken but unbeaten, an open wound the river refused to let heal. From that moment, the curse was no longer denied. Even the authorities did not return. And the parish was left to itself, unmoored from the church, abandoned by the state, caught in the pull of something older, something that had proved stronger than torch and prayer alike. Do you see the brilliance of it? Every attempt to bury the curse only fed it. Every act of defiance became proof, and proof is the most dangerous contagion of all. But here is where we step from history into practice. Because you must understand, a curse like this does not end. It lingers, it seeps, it waits, and those who hear it told aloud, who let it reach their ears, are already marked. The story is the river, the words are the water, and by listening you have waded in, which is why I must give you this. The phrase, the binding. The only protection the parishioners whispered when they realized the prints were no longer at the graves but in their very homes. The phrase you must say not once but twice, aloud or in writing, to close the circle around you, to keep the laughter at the edge of your dreams rather than at your bedside. The phrase is this: the river takes, but it cannot keep me. Once to speak it, twice to seal it. Fail to repeat it, and you will know what the parish knew, that footprints always lead back to the water. You may scoff, you may roll your eyes, dismiss this as performance. But tell me honestly, do you feel the hairs rise on your arms even now? That is how it begins. The curse is not teeth in the dark. It is the suggestion that you are already chosen, that you will follow, even unwilling. Say it twice. The river takes, but it cannot keep me. Do it, or carry the echo with you into your sleep. This is why forbidden histories are not taught, not because they are false, but because they still function. The curse of the Marigny sisters is not a tale, it is a system. One that unraveled the power of priests, soldiers, even the state, and now it has found you. Do you think it ended there? that the curse drowned with the priests or burned with the broken church? No, that was only the beginning, because curses are not bound by time. They do not decay like bodies. They flow like rivers, unbroken, winding their way through generations until they find new soil. And the Mississippi is eternal. It still runs, swollen, restless, carrying silt and bones alike. Do you believe a current like that forgets? The Marigny sisters became legend, yes, but legend is only another name for persistence. In the years after the drownings, families swore the prince still appeared, though the cemetery was abandoned. Farmers plowing near the banks found their fields waterlogged with no storm. Children went missing and were found days later, dazed, standing barefoot at the water's edge, unable to explain how they got there. By the late 19th century, the story had spread beyond the parish. Travelers wrote of haunted waters. Folklorists collected scraps of testimony, always the same refrain: 3 drowned girls who would not stay buried, always the same signs: prints in the mud, laughter in the mist, dreams that soaked the sleeper's bed. But here is where the story sharpens, because it never remained just a story. Even now, in the 21st century, Louisiana still speaks of it, quietly, in kitchens, in bars, on porches at dusk, not to tourists, not to outsiders, but to each other. Mothers still tell their children not to walk near the river at night. Fishermen still leave offerings, a coin, a bottle, a bit of bread. And in certain parishes, if you ask too directly about the Marigny sisters, you will see eyes narrow, voices drop, as though the very name still carries weight. And then there are the reports. 1993, a family driving back from Baton Rouge swerved near the levee when their daughter screamed that she saw 3 girls holding hands in the fog. No other witnesses. The road was empty. 2007, 2 men duck hunting before dawn claimed to hear splashing behind them. When they turned, the water was calm, but when they looked down, their boots were covered in small, wet prints. 2018, a college student posted online about waking in her dorm drenched with mud between her toes. She thought it was a prank, until other students replied with the same story. The thread was deleted within hours. Do you think this is coincidence, or is it continuity? The curse is not a fossil. It adapts. It moves through whispers, through rituals, through the simple act of remembering. That is how it has survived 176 years, and now it has found its way here, into your ears, your mind, your screen. Because folklore is not passive. It is not ink on paper, not pixels on a feed. Folklore is alive because it requires a host. The moment you know the story, you become part of it. You have already carried the curse further, even if you do not speak it aloud. You cannot hear the sisters' names and remain untouched. And that is why I warned you in the last section. Why I gave you the phrase, "The river takes, but it cannot keep me." Some of you repeated it, some of you scoffed, some of you forgot. But here is the truth. The curse does not care what you believe. It cares only what you carry. Belief is not protection. Ritual is. And if you do not seal yourself, you are marked. Do not misunderstand me. This is not theater. It is transmission. You are hearing what should not be spoken aloud. That is how the sisters return. Not through water, through words, through memory, through you. And here is the final test. Tonight, when you lie in bed, you will hear it. A sound you cannot place. A drip of water. A splash in the dark. Footsteps where no one walks. It may be nothing. It may be the beginning. You will dream, and in your dream you will see 3 small figures hand in hand watching from the edge of the water. They will not rush you. They will not speak. They will simply wait, smiling, inviting. And you must remember the phrase. Say it once. Say it twice. Bind yourself, or follow them into the current, as so many before you have. This is not entertainment. This is not folklore. This is an active thing. The curse of the Marigny sisters is alive, in the water, in the soil, in the memory, and now, in you. The river takes, the river waits, and the river never sleeps. The question is not whether you believe. The question is whether you will survive what you now know. Say it, twice, before the footprints reach your door. Now you see why this story was never meant for paper, why priests denied it, why the parish buried it beneath silence, because once the words are spoken, they do not vanish, they live, they follow, and they choose who listens closely enough to carry them further. You have been chosen, not by me, not by chance, by the current itself. Think back to every strange sound you've ever heard in the night, the drip of water when no faucet leaks, the creak of a floorboard when no one walks, the shadow in the corner that should not have shape. How many of those did you dismiss, laughing it off, comforting yourself with logic? You told yourself you were imagining things, but what if you weren't? What if those small, quiet disturbances were not accidents at all, but the first signs of something already watching? Understand this: curses do not announce themselves. They seep. They seep into the cracks of your routine. They bend your perception. They make you doubt, until the doubt itself opens the door. That is how the sisters spread. That is how the river reaches beyond Louisiana, beyond 1849, beyond the grave. And now, through this very moment, the water has reached you. Do you feel it? That prickling tension on your skin, as if someone else is in the room? That weight in your chest, as though the air has thickened, pressing down? That is not coincidence. That is recognition. They know you now. But here is where your choice matters. Most men go through life blind, asleep, lulled by the illusions of control. You are different. You are awake. You have looked directly into the forbidden, and the forbidden has looked back. That alone sets you apart. You must decide, will you let this mark fade into fear and forgetfulness? Or will you step into the lineage of those who carried dangerous knowledge forward? Will you cower when the river knocks at your door? Or will you stand, repeat the words, and remind the darkness that you are not prey? Say it with me, one final time. The river takes, but it cannot keep me. Do not whisper it, do not mumble it, speak it as a declaration, as a weapon, as a shield. Twice, always twice. That is how you bind the curse and turn fear into strength. And then, once you have spoken it, you must act. Not because I ask you, but because the river demands it. Carry the words into the world. Leave them in the comments below. Write them where others can see, where others can be mocked, where others can awaken. That is how the chain continues. That is how the sisters are both contained and remembered. This is not superstition. This is survival. When you shut this screen, the silence will press heavier. You may glance over your shoulder. You may hear something outside your window. If you do not panic. You have already armed yourself. You are already part of the current. You are not alone. The river watches, the sisters wait, but so do we. A brotherhood of men who see the shadows for what they are, who do not flinch when history drags its claws across the present. You are one of us now. You have crossed the threshold, and from this night forward, you will never walk by water the same way again. The footprints are already forming, the mist is already rising, but you know what to do. Speak the words, twice, claim your place, because the river takes. But it cannot keep you, not if you refuse, not if you remember, not if you fight. So fight, tonight, tomorrow, always. You think this is only about 3 drowned sisters, that the footprints are nothing more than echoes of a single family's tragedy? No, that is the mask. Beneath it lies something older, sharper, and far more dangerous. Look closer. What does this curse teach? It binds memory to fear. It spreads through whispers, repetition, ritual. It multiplies not by proof, but by suggestion. You cannot see the sisters, but you feel them. You do not touch the footprints, but you dread them. And still you carry the story forward. That is the machinery of control. This is how empires, churches, and institutions have ruled men for centuries. They do not always use swords. They use stories. They craft curses of obedience, curses of shame, curses of silence, and like the Marigny curse, these are not meant to be broken. They are meant to be obeyed. Think of it. The church knew the story of the sisters was spreading, yet they did not record it, did not preserve it. Why? Because it revealed their impotence. A priest cannot stop a curse that answers to no scripture. And what is the one thing an institution cannot tolerate? Exposure, weakness. So they erased the story, hoping silence would strangle it. But here's the truth. Suppression feeds power. What is forbidden becomes sacred. What is hidden becomes magnetic. The sisters survived precisely because the church tried to bury them. Just as countless forbidden truths have survived across centuries, truths about bloodlines, about rituals, about the true forces that move history. You see the pattern now, don't you? The curse of the Marigny sisters is not an isolated anomaly. It is a reflection. a reflection of how power operates in the shadows. Ask yourself, how many other stories have been erased because they revealed too much? How many curses, rituals, and forbidden accounts never made it into the books you read in school? Knowledge is a battlefield. History is not recorded to preserve truth, it is written to preserve power. The Marigny curse survived because ordinary men and women whispered it in taverns, kitchens, and riverbanks, but countless others did not. They were smothered before they could breathe, and yet the architecture is the same. All curses, all systems of hidden power follow the same rules. Rule 1. Control the unseen. Convince people that invisible forces watch them. Whether it is God, the devil, the river, or the state, it does not matter. What matters is that they believe eyes are always on them. Rule 2. Bind them with ritual. Tell them that survival depends on repeating words, performing acts, following codes. Break the ritual, and doom follows. It does not matter if the ritual is prayer, taxation, or a pledge of allegiance. The form changes, the function does not. Rule 3. Punish memory. Make men afraid to speak of forbidden things. Make them believe even remembering is dangerous. That is how silence is enforced. That is how obedience is carved into the marrow. Do you see it now? The Marigny curse is not only a family tragedy, it is a map, a demonstration of how psychological control can outlive generations, outlive the very soil it first haunted. And here is the darkest truth. It still works. Institutions still use it. Your life is surrounded by rituals you never chose, stories you never questioned, curses you never knew were binding you. You are told what to fear, who to hate, when to kneel, what to repeat, and every time you obey, you feed the system, just as the parish once fed the curse with silence and trembling. But men like you, men who seek the forbidden, have the power to break it, not by denial, not by pretending it isn't real. That is what the priests tried, and they failed. No. The only way to break a curse is to expose its structure, to see it clearly, name it, and refuse its grip. That is what we are doing now, peeling back the mask, showing you the machinery of fear, and once you see the gears turning, you can no longer be controlled by them. The Marigny sisters are still with us, yes, their footprints still press into the mud, but more importantly, their story unmasks the way institutions manipulate belief. Their curse is both literal and symbolic. Liti, rail enough to frighten a parish into silence, symbolic enough to reveal the skeleton of power that has always been here, hidden in plain sight. And if you feel unsettled, good. That means the programming is breaking. That means you are waking up, because what is more terrifying than ghosts? Realizing you have been haunted by control systems your entire life. Realizing that the curse was never just in the ground, but in your head, in your rituals, in your obedience. Remember this. Curses are not only cast by witches or rivers, they are cast by kings, priests, generals, bankers, by anyone who needs you to bow, obey, or forget. And if you do not see the curse, if you do not name it, you will live and die under it, blind, chained, drowned. But you have been shown the truth. You are not blind anymore. You are standing on the riverbank, staring into the current and realizing for the first time that the water is not only outside you. It has been flowing through you all along. The question is simple. Will you let it sweep you away? Or will you step into the mud, trace the footprints back, and break what was never meant to be broken? The choice is yours, and it always has been. Now we come to the part that no priest, no historian, no institution ever wanted you to reach. The curse is not just a story you consume, it is a strategy you can use, because once you recognize the pattern, once you see how curses are engineered, you can flip them. What was designed to bind you can be wielded to free you. The Marigny sisters' curse showed us the rules: unseen forces, ritual repetition, silenced memory. Those three elements are the skeleton of every system of control. But here's the secret. The same skeleton can be reversed. It can be turned against the very powers that created it. Let's break it down. Unseen forces. Institutions survive by convincing you that something invisible is watching. God, the law, the algorithm, the economy. You obey not because someone stands over you with a whip, but because you fear punishment you cannot see. This is the oldest trick in human history. But once you recognize it, you can use it. You can remind yourself that you, too, are unseen. Your mind, your will, your silence when you choose to keep it, these are your invisible weapons. What they cannot see, they cannot stop. Ritual repetition. Look at your life. You already perform rituals every day. Work schedules, national pledges, digital scrolls. They are designed to condition you, to strip away your sovereignty one repetition at a time. But rituals are not the enemy. They are neutral. The enemy is whose ritual you are performing. Once you take control of your own rituals, your own words, your own actions, your own repetitions, you reclaim power. Every time you declare, "The river takes, but it cannot keep me," you are not feeding their curse. You are carving your own. You are programming your mind to resist. Silenced memory. This is their sharpest blade. History is not written to preserve truth. It is written to erase it. That's why you've never heard of the Marigny curse until now. That's why your textbooks are sanitized. That's why entire wars, massacres, and bloodlines are buried in the footnotes. Silence is their weapon. But if silence is power, then speech is rebellion. Every time you share forbidden history, every time you repeat a name they tried to erase, you are breaking their spell. You are resurrecting what they meant to bury. Do you understand now? The curse is not something to fear. It is a teacher, a blueprint. The very tools they use to bind generations in silence are the same tools you can use to unlock yourself. But here is the part most men will never grasp. This awakening is not comfortable. It is not safe. Once you see the machinery of control, you can never unsee it. The river never oaks the same again. Every ritual, every story, every law will feel like a footprint pressed into your life by hands you never shook. That awareness will burn. It will make you restless. But that restlessness is your power. Most men are asleep. You are not. And here is the key. Resistance is not loud. Resistance is not dramatic. Resistance is quiet, patient, strategic, like the river itself. You do not need to shout to be dangerous. You need only to move steadily, carving your own channel, eroding their banks until the whole structure collapses into the water. Think of the sisters again. They drowned, yes, but their silence became louder than any sermon. Their absence became more commanding than their presence. Their refusal to stay buried tore open the illusion of institutional control. That is the power of resistance, to turn their systems back against them. So here is what you must do. Choose your rituals carefully. Speak your words deliberately. Refuse the silence they demand. This is not fantasy. This is practice. And the man who masters practice becomes untouchable. Look around you. Every screen you watch, every law you obey, every tradition you inherit, it all hums with unseen forces, demanding repetition, feeding on silence. Most men never question it. But you have. That alone makes you rare. That alone makes you dangerous. And dangerous men are the ones who change everything. So I ask you, are you willing to carry this knowledge beyond tonight? Are you willing to weaponize what was meant to curse you? To step into the river, not as a victim, but as the one who commands the current? Because once you accept it, there is no turning back. The world will look different. The masks will fall away. And you will see every priest, every politician, every institution, every manipulator for what they truly are. Engineers of curses. You will not be fooled again. You have stared into the forbidden, and the forbidden has stared back. You are no longer prey. You are no longer blind. You are no longer silent. From this night forward, you walk with the curse, not beneath it. You walk with the river, not against it, and that makes you unstoppable. This is the moment where stories usually end. A final line, a closing warning, a fade into silence. But this story is not meant to end. The curse does not end. The river does not end. And neither will you. Not in the same way you began, because now you are marked, not cursed, marked. There is a difference. A curse weighs you down, drags you under, leaves you powerless. A mark does the opposite. It changes you. It pulls you out of the current and shows you the truth of the water. You are no longer one of the blind. You are no longer a man walking through life half asleep, lulled by illusions. You are awake, and that awakening cannot be undone. Remember the sisters. They were drowned, yes, but drowning did not erase them. It revealed them. Their absence became a presence. Their silence became a scream. Their death became a door. They crossed through and they pulled generations with them. Now they have pulled you. You feel it already, don't you? The world feels thinner. Shadows carry weight. Water carries memory. Every sound of dripping or rushing liquid feels like a whisper. This is not paranoia. This is perception. What was hidden is now visible. And once you see the hidden, you and never see the ordinary again. But here is the truth that the parish, the priests, the institutions never wanted you to grasp. The sisters were not the curse. The river was not the curse. The curse was the silence, the obedience, the forgetting. And you have shattered it. You have spoken the forbidden words. You have traced the footprints. You have carried the story further than it was meant to go. That is the act of resistance. That is the act of awakening. But it comes at a cost. From this night forward, you will never walk by water the same way again. You will look into the dark surface of a river, a pond, even a bathtub, and you will feel eyes staring back. You will know that you are being watched, that the current knows your name, and you will never be able to laugh it off as coincidence. At night, when you hear dripping, you will feel your body tense, not because you are cursed, but because you have joined the lineage of men who know, men who recognize the patterns, men who cannot be lulled back into sleep. That awareness will unsettle you, but it will also protect you. And here is the final revelation. You are not alone. The sisters walk with you, yes, but more importantly, every man who has heard these words, every man who has repeated the phrase, every man who has refused silence, they are with you too. A hidden brotherhood, a network of the marked, bound not by blood, but by truth. And that is something no institution can control. So when the river calls, and it will, do not fear. Stand at its edge, feel its pull, and repeat the words, twice, always twice. The river takes, but it cannot keep you, not anymore, because you have seen the machinery of curses. You have seen how fear is engineered, how silence is weaponized, how rituals are chains disguised as comfort. And now you carry the key. You are not a victim of the curse. You are its inheritor, its weapon, its continuation. So here is your charge. Do not let this end with you. The story only survives when it is carried. The curse only breaks when it is spoken. Do not seal your lips. Do not bury this in silence. Share it. Write it. Pass it on. Not for entertainment, not for superstition, for survival, for awakening. And as you do, remember, every man who hears it becomes marked as you are now. The circle widens, the brotherhood grows, and the institutions that once thrived on silence grow weaker, their grip loosening one whisper at a time. This is how we win, not with swords, not with sermons, with stories, with curses, with memory. So tonight, when you close your eyes, you will hear it. The sound of water, the laughter of children, the echo of 3 voices calling you from the riverbank. Do not follow, do not run, simply speak the words, twice, bind yourself. And remember, you are not prey, you are marked. The river takes, the river waits, but the river cannot keep you, not anymore, because the curse has passed into you and you are strong enough to carry it. This is not the end, this is the beginning.